All right, I've got some more Breya here. There's just a few games here that I played today, but they were interesting. So rather than trying to flood with a series of uninteresting games, I thought I'd present a few that were more fun, more interesting. So first of all, I'll bring up the deck list at the end, by the way. So here it is, the Breya mirror match. I'm going second. My opponent plays Temple of Epiphany and Tux. I should have strip mined him right there because that almost always means they're looking for land. It could mean that they're flooded, but generally it means they're looking for land. But I don't, and notice my opponent missed a land drop, so I'm paying the price here. I could have strip mined him and probably just won the game on the spot. But I didn't, so now I have to catch up a little bit. And I can't really afford to sack the strip mine here because I need to get that Guild of Lotus in play. Fortunately, my opponent tapped some blue mana there, so it looks like it's probably going to resolve. And it does. Yay. So I'm going to sit on Forbid, not run out the Mentor or Spellseeker. So the game plan here is I'm going to walk my opponent into a trap, or that's the plan, in which I Spellseeker for Vandal Blast and then blow it all in the same turn. But this only works if my opponent's kind of tapped out. So because of that, I go ahead and Forbid there and stall for tempo. Strip their Inventor's Fair away. I don't want them to recover after the big VB. And set up Mentor on the board, which is really nice with the Sword of Feast and Famine because now I've got a lot of pressure on my opponent, and they can't use single target removal to do anything about it. So what I was hoping would happen there was that would be the turn they would play Breya. And then on my turn I would go Spellseeker, Vandal Blast, get a Monk, smash your face, and I assume my opponent gives up with 3 mans facing 4 creatures in the Sword of Feast and Famine. But instead they went for the Tezzeret, so I threw the counterspell at them, and they gave up in the face of that, I guess. What could have happened is that I could have played Breya next turn. I have 8 mana, so I could have cast Breya, sacked, killed the Ethereum Sculptor, equipped, smashed my opponent, untapped my 3 lands, threw down Spellseeker, gone for Vandal Blast, and passed. So that could have been a turn. That could have been the sequence next turn, depending on what I drew. Either way, though, my opponent didn't stick around. Mentor is a pretty gross card, and I can understand why they didn't stick around to get beat down by Mentor Sword. So, game 2, but it was interesting anyway, and always fun to play the mirror. I'm playing against Muldrotha the Gravetide, so if this thing gets down, my opponent's going to get to play cards from the graveyard, and I'm probably going to lose if they have cards in the graveyard, and ooh, yuck. Okay, so that's a big threat. And I have no colored mana right now. And my opponent plays Mystic Remorse and discards Terrastodon, so whoa, I'm going to have to pause the game. So they fetched World Shaper, which will fill my opponent's graveyard with options and then provide them with a ton of mana for playing those options. Now with Mystic Remorse on the board, I realize I could play a Wasteland game here, but if I play Guild of Lotus, my opponent will draw a card, but then I can play one of my creatures. They will not draw off of that. And so if I play the Lotus here, I get a lot of tempo. And I figure I'm probably better off getting said tempo now rather than waiting it out. I could waste their Palace there, but here's the other fear. They just threw a Terrastodon in the graveyard and they have survival. That usually means they're playing Reanimator. And if this thing pops out, I lose unless I have a way to recover. So if I can get Trinket Mage down now, then I can go ahead and grab myself a Crypt, right? So if they blow up my mana now, Lotus, land, right? With some kind of reanimation effect, I can get right back in the game with Crypt, Felwar, and then play off of that. So instead my opponent plays Lotus, World Shaper. They got their 1 card off Mystic Remorse, so it was like 1 blue, discard a card, draw a card. Discard this card, draw a card, which isn't the greatest thing ever. So with that, I'm free to go crazy. So I Spell Shaper for Plow and go ahead and clamp the Spell Shaper. It's just such a good card. This card's so flexibly good, as it was. And my opponent does have reanimation effect. So they take out, I'm going to pause. Gilded Lotus, Sand Dynamo, agree, and Strip Mine. I don't agree with that. They left me with 3 colors of mana over here and 2 mana here. So either one of these I think was a better target than Strip. But I think they did it because they only have the 1 green. However, I have a strong suspicion my opponent's going to regret that. So it's not often that you get a reanimated Terrastodon and come back to win, but that's exactly what I'm going to try to do here. So let's see what happens. So I draw Karn and decide that the play for the turn is Demonic Tutor. Boom. My opponent killed 3 of my mana sources. I just killed, quote unquote, killed 5 of theirs, right? So I was thinking about this here, and I decided I'm going to let that through, and I'm going to pressure my opponent. Luckily, I win the flip, but the reason I did this is because I have this follow-up. So I actually am the aggro in this situation. I should have left 1 elephant back and sent in trinkets, so that way an elephant and a construct could kill Terrastodon, but I chump block here, and I think that's just fine. I basically chump block in order to smash my opponent for half their life total. And then with exactly 3 cards in their hand, thank you, Falwar, again, providing the color I needed, which was black this game, I take all of their cards away. And I guess they were F6'd or something, because that Cyclonic Rift should have been played on my Winter Orb instead, or my Construct, or I'm not quite sure what happened there. Doesn't make any sense to me. Opponent still had outs, but I guess they just, I don't know, they mentally checked out when the orb hit, or I'm not really sure, but I'll take it. Opponent at this point can't really play much and loses. And it's games like this where I was so frustrated with Winter Orb being banned in 1v1, because if you look at it, opponent getting a turn 2 or turn 3 or whatever, Terrastodon, an early Terrastodon, right? And killing like all of your mana was perfectly legal in that format. But the one card that lets you recover wasn't. So, just craziness. But fortunately, Winter Orb is back, and so is Breya. So I managed to beat the Terrastodon, so I'm pretty good. And then I got into this game, and I thought, wow, another good game. How lucky. I don't really get super competitive games that frequently these days, so this was really nice. So I got a third game. I don't know if it was super competitive, but it was a good one. It was a fun one. So Galta, Primal Hunger there, and I've got a pretty mediocre hand here. I mean, I have Empiric Tutor, but I put Talisman on top. And you see what's happening now? I guess this wasn't, well, I don't know how competitive it was, but the bottom line was it was enjoyable, because every time you pay X life to draw X cards on a recurring basis, it's a pretty fun game. So got an early Necro here, and I think from there it's pretty easy to get the win. So the card I fetched here, because I'm winning the game, and mana is more important than cards, but I had Mystical Tutor, is Force of Will, so that's effectively a free, it's free mana, right? Opponent's trying to rebuild there, but I'm of course going to smash hand there for 4. I left him with 2 cards, and normally I don't like to do that, but I thought that made more sense than giving him, with the Basalt Monolith on the board, I didn't want him to have the opportunity to play something awful that I might not be able to deal with. Like, for example, Carnage Tyrant. I mean, I suppose I could have dealt with it, but I didn't want to have to, so. Excuse me. All right, so now, at this point, for some reason I thought this game was more challenging than it was. I guess it just worked out fine, and it wasn't as great as I thought it was, but it was a fun game, and the other 2 were definitely pretty challenging. Yeah, so this one was more of a one-sided affair, but always fun to see Breya do what Breya does, I think. So that was it. Just 3 games, and I did at least get to put the mentor into action and kind of see how nice that is, how enjoyable it is, and I do think the card's pretty strong. So I'm pretty happy with the way that this deck is designed right now. I don't see any changes. I was looking ahead at spoilers and looking for cards that might be good. There is a 2 casting cost human, Lavinia, something like that. But what it does is it prevents your opponent from playing non-creature spells that cost 0 or that don't have a mana cost. So they can't force a will. Excuse me. Or play like Mana Crypt. And also, if I remember right, and then they cannot play cards that cost, or non-creature cards that cost more than the number of lands they control. So you can imagine how tough that would be for me to deal with in the Breya deck, potentially, right? So, I mean, I could get land down and play Breya and then kill the thing. But there could definitely be situations where I'm really hurting for land, and that thing is making it impossible for me to really recover. So I'm sitting there with, say I'm short on land, but I have I don't know, Soul Ring and Thran Dynamo and Gilded Lotus, and I'm sitting there and I can't play, and I have, off of a Mishra's Workshop. So my opponent plays land, I go shop, Soul Ring, Dynamo, Grim, Lotus, something like that, right? And then my opponent goes land, plays that thing. And I go, oh, well, if I don't have removal and I can't get to Breya for that mostly colorless draw, I'm just going to sit there and look at that thing because I only have 1 land. So, all of this side of my deck is basically dead. Can't play any of these cards. And I think if I'm right about not playing 0 drops, you can't play these. So it would reduce my deck to just that and some lands. Under that condition. And I mean, that's a little absurd, and the card may not stick, but it's definitely worth a shot just for that matter. It's also a human, which goes nicely with the Cavern of Souls. So, of the new set, out of all the cards, I'm not eager for that card like I was when I saw Karn. It was just jaw drop, and then Teferi was crazy. The fact that it dealt with everything, which this deck was having trouble dealing with sometimes, and then combos with Winter Orb was just nuts. And of course, Karn is just in an artifact-based deck. It's crazy, and is a Jam Day Tome plus pressure. So when I saw those 2 cards, I was excited. This other one, so. So let me know what you think. Maybe there's some other card I overlooked. Most of them, the set looks like they alternated between making worse versions of cards that already exist, like Mana Leak that only. They have a Mana Leak that actually it's not even a Mana Leak. It's a Rune Snag, so it's counter target spell unless its controller pays 2, but it doesn't increment like Rune Snag did, and it doesn't have cycling like Miscalculation, and it doesn't make them pay 3 like Mana Leak. So it's basically just the worst version of that effect you could possibly add to your deck. That's what most of the cards in the next set look like. Just worse versions of other stuff you could play. At least for the Breya deck, from what I could see. A couple Planeswalkers that look maybe okay, but for the most part, probably not. So, tell me what you think. Tell me what you see. I'm interested. And thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.